So it's no secret that the Zeb Wells comics aren't the best in the history of the character. In fact, some people have even stated that his comics are the worst Spider-Man comics that they have ever read. They're not wrong entirely. However, there is a glimmer of hope. There is a silver lining that if Zeb Wells gets this one thing right, it could leave a decent lasting impact on the fans and the audience for this comic going forward in the future. And that is the return of the Green Goblin in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 50. Why is this so important? Well, let's talk about it. Now, for those of you who have stuck around on the channel for a while, and if you haven't, then by all means, give that subscribe button a little tap, just a little tap, then you will know that we have been criticizing this run for as long as you can remember. This run has been full of character assassinations, bad character writing, this guy called Rabin that no one has ever heard of, and of course, everyone's favorite character, Paul. Either way, what I'm getting at is that these books at the moment aren't very well known for being good stories. However, the one thing that I believe Zeb Wells has consistently gotten right over his time writing this book is the relationship between Peter Parker and Norman Osborn. Now, I must make a very, very big disclaimer. Was this a good idea to begin with? No, absolutely not. If you're not aware, Norman Osborn had his sins revoked towards the end of Nick Spencer's run on the character, meaning that the Green Goblin side of him was no more. And this meant that going into Zeb Wells' run, Peter and Norman ended up becoming friends. However, I just want to put it out there that Peter and Norman should have never become friends in the first place. That's a really, really terrible idea. After the history that these two characters have had over the years in Spider-Man comics, from battles to mind games, and even the death of Gwen Stacy, which is one of the most important deaths in Marvel history, Norman Osborn is the last person that Peter Parker should be friends with, sins revoked or not. However, since this was a massive selling point of this series, this is something that me and you guys have had to come accustomed to. And once you are able to look past the fact that this was a terrible idea to begin with, Wells actually writes this relationship pretty soundly. They have great chemistry throughout some of the issues, and them working together is actually the highlight of some of the comics in this run, which is really nice to see when some of the issues in this run are genuinely god-awful. And if it wasn't obvious enough, this is leading up to the Green Goblin making his grand return in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 50. However, the one thing that's different this time is there's a new meaning to it now. It's not like Peter has to face the Goblin because, well, he has to. No, they're friends. There is a different narrative being spun on this Goblin versus Spider-Man story that they're building up to. They're both friends, and that adds an extra layer of depth to the story, which is quite surprising from this run. And this is why precisely Wells needs to get this final confrontation right. If this battle between two of the greatest comic book characters of all time ends up falling flat on its face, it's going to leave an even worse taste in the mouths of the readers. However, if he manages to pull it off and manages to write a satisfying conclusion to this story that he has been building up for 50 issues, it could actually resolve a lot of the issues that this run has had. You see, a lot of the main criticisms that this run has accumulated over the last few years or so come down to one simple thing: the stories have no stakes. The story that fell victim to this mostly was the Rabin stuff and Peter breaking up with MJ. There were no stakes to that story because characters like Paul were so one-dimensional. And when characters are one-dimensional beings, they become plot conveniences, and the audience can really see through the story when this happens. The audience, you and me, can recognize that Paul is a very, very bad character. Not only is he really poorly written, he's only there to push the story forward rather than being an interesting character. And if Paul was actually an interesting character, that would make Peter and MJ's breakup believable. However, because he isn't, this of course lessens the value of the conflict, and thus the stakes of the resolution to these stories are lessened as well. And that didn't just happen with the Paul stuff, this happened with Chasm as well. During the Dark Web event, Ben Reilly's character was mistreated so badly and written so out of character that the idea of Chasm became completely unbelievable to the audience. And when a story seems to be forced the way that Dark Web was, it once again destroys the stakes of the story. So it all comes down to the stakes of the story, the stakes of the conflict that we are reading. However, the one continuous narrative that has been written pretty well is actually, surprisingly, Norman and Peter's friendship. They've bonded over their love of science, they've bonded over Norman's obsession to prove himself, they've bonded over helping each other and helping New York City together. Therefore, this story has had levels to it that some of the other stuff that Zeb Wells has written did not. This run's turning point could genuinely be The Amazing Spider-Man issue 50, when the Green Goblin finally faces off against Spider-Man again. And that's why issue 50 for Zeb Wells really is make or break for the run and the character at this point in time. And well, if Wells fumbles the bag, then I don't know, it just gets worse. I really hope Wells hits the nail on the head with this one, because I just want these comics to be good, man. That's all I want. That's all you guys want. That's all any of us want. I also want to urge you guys to subscribe, because this weekend I've got my Greg Weisman Spectacular Spider-Man issue 1 review coming this Saturday, so you're not going to want to miss that. Oh boy, this book is good. And also, we post Spider-Man content weekly, and we do live streams, and I post shorts as well. So if you love Spider-Man, this YouTube channel is for you, so make sure to hit that big red button. My name's Lewis. Take care, and peace.